Good evening and welcome to another edition of Mental Health Mondays brought to you by Saving Grace Community Church and Grace House Cincinnati, a nonprofit and ministry of Saving Grace Community Church. I'm Pastor Trevor Phillips along with my friend and my brother, Dr. Quentin Moss, founder and CEO and medical director of Modern Psychiatry. Good evening, my friend.
Good evening, sir.
I hope that this evening finds everything well with you.
Yes. I've been a blessed day.
And that none of your patients were traumatized by your white coat today. I'm sure every little knock on the door and you came and everything was just copacetic. Everything was good.
Everything's good.
Well, this month, tonight, our subject is taking care of yourself. And it's always something that we talk about doing. And many people in conversations will readily recognize it's something they need to do and do a better job of doing, is practicing self-care. And I like to say that self-care is the best care. All sorts of things can snowball. The lack of self-care, things can snowball, have a snowball effect on your general health and lead to other things. And it just so happens that we are nearing the end of Suicide Prevention Month of September. We know that in our country, according to the Centers of Disease Control, that suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the nation. And recent studies have shown, as recently as 2019, that 47,000 people have died as a result of suicide, and 1.38 million, there were 1.38 million suicide attempts in our country. Why should we practice self-care, and why should we do it and don't feel guilty about it, Dr. Moss?
It's necessary for our survival. It really is. When we think about self-care, and whether it's taking out time for ourselves or doing the things that are necessary so that we can be physically well, it's necessary for us to be able to continue, to be able to thrive, to fulfill the roles that we have, and to have an abundant life. Without self-care, the body starts to work against itself, and we start to accelerate aging, cause a long list of chronic diseases. Not to mention what it does to our mental health and what it does to some individuals, perhaps in increasing suicide risk.
You said something was critical. Oftentimes, we run into people who will give their age, and we're kind of mesmerized by it because we say, well, you really don't look as old as you say that you are. How much does it have to do with that individual in terms of maybe genetics or just practicing self-care?
Some of it is genetics, of course, right? But some of it is being able to replenish our bodies. And our genetic material we're born with, but how our genetic material expresses itself, we have a lot of control over that. So how much we sleep, how much nutrition we take in versus junk, how much alcohol we take in, how much drugs we take in for sure. These things can accelerate aging. And we know that anxiety and worry can also accelerate aging. These things have an effect on our genes such that, our telomere length starts to get shortened. Our body starts to respond differently to the environment in which we live.
Yeah, because there are some people that, no shade on them that might be watching that I've graduated high school with. And I scratched my head and I said, did we really graduate together, or did you graduate a couple decades before me?
Yeah.
Some people do a really good job in practicing self-care. And as we focus on suicide, because not being in touch of your emotions, not being in touch with how you're feeling is an example of not practicing self-care. It's an example. See, oftentimes, Dr. Moss, I don't know about how it is with you when you talk to people. It's a tangible thing to see if someone's belt is turning toward the ground, or if one love handle is turning into five, it's easy to see if we're not keeping up with our bodies physically. But sometimes, if we're not practicing self care and taking care of our mental, it's a little hard to discern if that's happening.
Hmm. It is. And, some of us keep our emotions and our challenges close to the vest, meaning we don't share a whole lot. And
Mhm.
other people sometimes are able to more express that. But, the safest thing is for those loved ones that we have, those friends, and even those coworkers, reaching out to them and just asking, how things are going and are you okay?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
we sometimes put on the visage and the guard that everything's okay because I'm such a great worker, I'm such a great wife, such a great husband, I'm such a great child,
Mhm.
I'm fulfilling
Mhm.
that role. And with that label, we sometimes think it's hard for us to admit that things for this period of time are not fine. And so we got to help people realize that they're more than just that label of that great thing that they do or that thing that they're ashamed of. You're more than just that. That you are a genuine person who has feelings and emotions, who rise the tide of this life like the rest of us do. And sometimes those tides get a bit strong, and we need some help in
Mhm.
being able to have some clarity of what we think of ourselves, what we think of our future, and how we can manage wellness and safety. So it is perfectly fine to go up to someone and just ask them if you're okay.
It is that older, it's still that overriding stigma that we often discuss and bring up during our time on Mondays about mental health. Do the numbers indicate that, particularly because we know men, especially, even with their own physical health, sometimes struggle in maintaining that and being in touch with it? But as it relates to suicide, are there numbers that point to uh, parts of our population being more adversely affected than others?
Traditionally has been that we have women who may attempt more suicides, right? But men who may complete more suicide because men
Mm.
tend to gravitate to more violent ways to harm themselves. And,
Mhm.
there was also this previous notion that, we really have to worry about the Caucasian male who's over the age of 50 or 55. And as we accelerate in that age group, that they may be at great risk. But what we're finding, through some of the work of the Suicide Prevention Coalition here in Butler County, is that African American males are now increasing in suicide in the state of Ohio.
Wow.
As a matter of fact, from 2018 through 2014 to 2018, we've had a 54% increase in the number of African American males who have taken their lives.
Wow. What's the direct correlation, and what do you think that can be attributed to?
And the data hasn't shown that yet.
Hmm.
Why is this taking place? That we have more of our African American males who are attempting suicide, more of our Black teens who are also attempting suicide. We don't have the data as to why that's occurring, but that's pretty alarming. Particularly for a group of people who we don't always reach with mental health services already. And we're seeing this drastic increase in the number of people who are taking their lives.
Would it be somewhat of a novice guess to say that maybe one of the reasons why we see an increase in numbers, and particularly with African American men, is the level lack thereof of hope?
Hope is interesting you bring that up because when we
Mhm.
think about risk factors for suicide, we talk about people who are depressed, people who are anxious, or people who may have addiction, but none of those things have as great of an impact on people attempting suicide as hopelessness.
Wow.
So once we have struggles with hope and being able to see an answer, being able to see a way out, being able to see a tomorrow, once we lose hope, that is the greatest risk factor for
Mhm.
people attempting to take their lives. And what we want to do is be able to show people that there are solutions. There is a tomorrow. There's a way to improve this. There's a way to feel better. And your current situation is not a permanent situation.
Mhm.
But losing hope is a great risk factor for people attempting to take their lives.
And I guess that we would see it. That's kind of when we look at, not to veer off too much, but we look at Dr. Jack Kevorkian, who was really a couple decades ago, really advocating euthanasia and a person having the opportunity to take some end of life drugs, if you will, to speed up that process, which is still a great moral and ethical debate that we find ourselves in the grips of when we talk about those with chronic illnesses that are very painful and debilitating. When you think about that, it seemed as though that a person with a chronic illness where the diagnosis is something that this is going to be, it won't change. That would it appear medically that perhaps, especially in those situations, that the likelihood of suicidal thoughts would increase with that, and with if someone has a bad day every day, if someone has a Job day every day, where they lose everything and everything seems like, I'm sure that professionals like yourself and in my profession too, is try to help people channel through that.
One of the challenges is that, when we're depressed and anxious and overwhelmed, and when our own internal dialogue becomes an echo chamber, we're only listening to our thoughts. We're not really, listening to the counsel of other people or the input of other people. But when we're stuck up here, losing that job is at that moment for some people is like that cancer diagnosis. Having the termination of a relationship, or having, substantial financial distress. Sometimes our thoughts can become so distorted at those times that those seem like final moments. They seem like final decisions. There's nothing that can be changed with those. And what we want to try to do is to try to crack open that echo chamber so people can realize that these are situations which are not permanent, that we can't create solutions for. But the more depressed that we are, the more that we struggle sometimes with addiction, or the more anxious that we are, it's very difficult for us to look over the fence and see that there will be something different that's on the horizon. So our goal is to first, try to get folks to safety. I can't change necessarily the manner of your thinking and how you look at this. Let me get you to safety. Let me get you in front of someone that you can talk to. Let me get you to an emergency room so that they can do a further evaluation. And hopefully we can have an intervention that can keep that person safe, and find a medical and therapeutic, treatments that may be able to help folks move forward. But the big thing is just helping people see beyond this current moment, which for them is so overwhelming, intense, and hopeless.
I think our viewers, this is something right here that definitely should take note of. If a friend or a loved one receives a diagnosis, a bad diagnosis from the doctor, or life circumstances seem to be overwhelming, I think what I hear you saying is that we need to get in and make sure that that person is not isolating themselves and having conversations with themselves that are founded on hopelessness. Just by simply saying, how you doing? I understand that this has happened. I understand this diagnosis. Wow, this is crazy. I know I would be, and I'm sure you might be to some level feeling bad about this. And just a person saying, but I'm there. I'm willing to be with you. There's a couple segments that I want to share. Great documentary that Today Show did, and I want to share with our audience, and it's your comment and feedback after we watch it.
At the age of 10, I announced at the Thanksgiving dinner table that I was going to kill myself one day.
I didn't believe that anybody would care if I was gone. I didn't think anybody would even notice.
I remember thinking that my kids would be better off if I wasn't here.
I think I just kind of wanted all of the voices in my head to go away.
I was angry and depressed.
Total
I
darkness.
just felt
You
desperate.
should just be
You're
dead.
by yourself.
I was alone.
Nobody loves
It
you.
came crashing
I
down
just
on me.
wanted a way out.
You talked about, there it is, the conversations and the young ladies. So just to get that out, what are some things that we maybe do in terms of exercises or something therapeutic we could do till we may need to get to some help that would help us deal with that negative talk that happens within ourselves?
One of the things that we've spoken about is trying to reduce the isolation. When we're isolated, the enemy has a way of kind of cornering us in the cave, not much of a way of an escape. But if we can make sure that we keep ourselves connected to others in dialogue, in presence, that is great. Social media has many things that it's done for our civilization, which have been good. But on the backside of that, we've created a lot of these false connections, which give us the sense that we're connected to people, but we aren't. So being able to actually have conversations with people, being in physical presence of other people, that is a big help. The thing that we can do is try to continue to search for those things which are good that are happening around us. And many people say, well, there's nothing that's good that's happening around with me. There's nothing good that's worked out. And, where I start with my day, and I encourage other people to start with, is the fact that you actually just woke up today. And just by being here and waking up, you now have the opportunity to change your life from this very minute forward. You have so much opportunity, right? So, trying to challenge the framework of where we are. We talked about the importance of exercise, of sleep. But, one of the things that we do in medicine is that when someone's sick, we try to remove the offending agent, remove that thing that's making you sick. So if you're in a toxic environment, toxic relationship, remove yourself from that so that you'll have a chance for your mind and your body to start to heal. Many of the circumstances that occur to us are outside of our control. Things that are within our control, meaning who we decide to spend time with and where we decide to be, we can control that. And sometimes we find ourselves festering and lingering too long in situations that are just overwhelmingly toxic.
And self-preservations, and sometimes folk, especially in Christendom, it's almost counter-Christian to look out for yourself. But some folk really become feel guilty for doing things that keep their peace, keep their joy. But really, it's a matter of life and death.
It's interesting you say that, because I think about, Jesus in the Bible, and gosh, I can't imagine the burden, daily, of being here on earth and people who are hurting and people he wanted to help. But, after he performed miracles for a while, he retreated with his select crew. Right?
Absolutely.
And it took some time to be able to remove himself from that role of being the healer, being the preacher, all the time, every day. He removed himself from that. And I think that's a good example for us. We could be awesome in what we do and set ourselves aside from time to time as well. We can do that. And
it's just good to be able to remove yourself, retreat.
Yes.
And I'm in a personal retreats. I just believe it. I've got another one coming up in November, but it's just critical to be able to do that. It's not to say that every person you come in contact is toxic, but there are a few who generally are not. Let's look at this second segment.
My name is Nancy Yvonne Williams-Nettles. I guess around 28, I got married and had kids and all that, and then moved to Tennessee, hoping to get back together with my husband, and that didn't work out. It was painful because I truly loved him. I had lost my job. I'd been evicted for the first time. My stuff was laying on the sidewalk. Living out your car in a city you don't know with 2 kids, I couldn't see any way out. I could not see any way out. I knew that if I did the right amount of pills and the right amount of alcohol, that would eliminate any chance of me being revived. When I woke up, I was so angry. I mean, I was mad. Like, I was really mad at God. I'm trying to alleviate the pain that I was inflicting on my kids by leaving this earth so they wouldn't have to deal with me anymore and deal with the fact that I couldn't take care of them. And I wake up in this hospital alive. I was angry at God. Then I was mad at myself because I can't even get this right.
So we have in our first clip, the gentleman saying that he came to the table, said, I want to end it all. Then here, she failed, as all of these clips indicate, failed attempts of suicide. She says to herself, life is horrible. I can't even kill myself. I can't even do that. How common is the conversation or statements made to oneself simply saying, I can leave here, nobody would care?
Yeah, it's very common. Also common is what she mentioned. What's mentioned after that is that folks would be better off without us, and the data doesn't support that. People, particularly children, do very poorly in response to parental suicide. People are really damaged and scarred, and unfortunately take on a layer of guilt for what occurred. When bad things happen around children, bad things happen to people they love, there is a tendency for children to accept blame for what's occurred with them, whether it's a divorce, whether things went bad financially, or whether it's a parent that commits suicide. The child oftentimes accepts blame for that. And so that's a heavy blame that people live with even 50 and 60 years later, after their parents have committed suicide. So, that's all part of this thought distortion that occurs when we're overwhelmed and depressed. There's a lot of untruths that start to swivel around in this echo chamber. And again, our job is to try to, retrieve the person, from those untrue negative thoughts.
The thing that was interesting with her is that she found herself with her Bible in her hand, and she found herself in the church, and she was saying that she was angry with God. And I think sometimes in Christendom, people present and have a false theology or create in their own minds a misguided narrative about God. I think Jesus did say that in this world you shall have trials, but be of good cheer, for I have overcome the world. But when you are really depressed, because I think sometimes we can demonize mental illness, and I'm sure by the fact, because her Bible looked marked up, it wasn't something that was sitting on a coffee table that she spent some time in it. But she knew, and she probably had an understanding about God, but maybe she didn't have a great understanding of who God could be in the midst of a depression. Mm-hmm. But that's not to say that even if she had the right narrative, therapy and medicine wouldn't work. And sometimes I think people say it's either one or the other, and they fail to see that they can work together.
They can work beautifully together. For a lot of us, our spirituality is the framework of our lives. We can have other things ripped away, through life circumstances, but we still have that framework or structure of our relationship to God, as the strength for what we have. Pastor, one of the things that's interesting is that, people can have an appreciation for God, but be so depressed that they cannot reestablish that connection. And it's amazing. And, I love to see when people feel that their depression is lifting and then they have a great deal of clarity, and that clarity allows for them to be able to better experience their spiritual lives. So I think that these are things that are interwoven. I think that faith works to improve our life circumstance and give us something to hold on to. And at the same time, medications help us to get better, but it also helps us to better understand ourselves and our relationship to our God. So, I think they are interwoven, and that's why I love doing what I do.
The holistic approach is the best thing. And again, it's not one or the other. Or if you're not where you should be, if you are overwhelmed with hopelessness, it may be a faith issue, but it also may be a physiological issue because of a chemical imbalance that is increasing your level of hopelessness.
That's right.
Because though as Christians, we have the Spirit of God living inside of us, the indwelling presence of God, we're still in the flesh. And so while our faith screams, God, I know you can do it, our body says, well, when is it going to happen? I've been waiting too long. And therein lies the struggle. One final clip.
It is what runs through my veins. The words are, earth has no sorrow that heaven cannot heal. Earth has no sorrow but heaven can remove. Earth has no sorrow that heaven cannot cure. And because of my own belief, I believe that we do languish. We have wounded hearts. And sometimes we're constantly kneeling and praying, but doesn't mean things are going to go away. And that's what this song, this hymn talks about. I use music all the time. I honestly use it, and I know that it is a healing mechanism, but I also know sometimes it has to be coupled with something else. In the Black community, that is like, you do not talk about that. Eventually, I realized you got high blood pressure, you're taking high blood pressure medicine. Wait a minute. So you can do that, but because I have a mental illness and I'm on medication, oh no, we don't talk about that. Oh no. You don't want to deal with it, but the reality is if you don't deal with it, then it's going to get worse, just like cancer. I know that there are lots of people who are survivors of suicide. I think my biggest goal, period, is to make it so that it is a conversation that we can have without it being stigmatized and judged. Okay. I should be dead. And I'm not. And now I believe I had a purpose.
You do play that well.
I got chills. She was playing a hymn that I'm familiar with, titled "Come Ye Disconsolate, Where'er Ye Languish," and the refrain that earth has no sorrow that heaven cannot cure or heal. That's a very powerful, and for her to be playing that song is a recognition of real life pain, but it's also a recognition of a supernatural possibility for intervention and change in her whole emotional state. And she's not what we would call, obviously, a babe or a young person in the faith. She's got some maturity there. But again, she struggles with the stigma. But then that self-talk, as we often talk about, if I can take something for high blood pressure and still raise my hand and praise, then I can take something for my mental and still raise my hand and praise.
I think it's I was glad that you shown these clips tonight because I like ending with triumph.
Yes.
But it speaks to how when we have how we have illness, and whether we're talking about mental illness tonight, how it can just cover the beauty and the talent and the capabilities that we have. And here was a very talented woman, with many gifts that God had given her, and mental illness for a period of time had kind of dampened those things.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that people understand that in getting treatment, it doesn't change who you are. It doesn't do that, but the greatness that's within you, it allows it to grow and blossom. That which
Yes.
God wants you to be, it allows you to be a help in being that. So
Yes.
hope that people have an appreciation for that.
Well, thanks again, Dr. Moss, for your time tonight, and to our viewers, those that are watching this broadcast now, and those that will watch this broadcast as it replays in the days ahead. We really believe that as we look and stress the importance of taking care of yourself in the next couple of weeks, that the information given and the conversations we have, we really, 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 really believe that it will help you feel better, become better, and we really believe it will help you to live better. Good night, everyone.